This is a Rough Tiger production.
And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
And we're back. Hey.
Basketball. Basketball, basketball, basketball. Basketball, basketball.
Hello again, and we're back. Thanks for listening. Sorry for the mistake at the beginning of last episode. I failed to edit out. So those of you that heard that, oops, sorry, my bad. Morris just told me about that just now. I never heard it.
It's the rare limited edition 111 episode.
The collector's episode. Yeah. So oops. Hey folks, this is Dream Idiots. We're back. That's Morris. I'm Bryan. Each week we tell stories to each other and we drag your ass along.
Yes, and I have been glued to the set for the most part with March Madness. So it's time to get back to reality here, or what passes for it here at Dream Idiots.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty good run so far though with the tournament. It's been fun. So
yeah.
The Lady Utes are doing well, and the men's team is over the NIT, which I will watch tonight because, hey, at least they're in a tournament. So
Right, there you go.
All right. Any announcements, Bryan, for this week?
No announcements that I know of, at least on my end. We appreciate you listening and doing all those things for us. Please like and share and subscribe our stuff. Give us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Give us a review if you'd like. You can drop us a line at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram or on Facebook at Dream Idiots. We're actually on Patreon as well at Dream Idiots. You can sign up there for free as well if you'd like. And if you're local to San Antonio, you can listen to us on 101.5 FM.
Woohoo!
That's
Bryan, this episode is going to drop on the 26th of March. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think it is. And we are still in Women's Month here in March. And it occurred to me that I had not yet done a story pertaining to that. So I thought I would take care of that tonight and tell you about 2 American women who made an important contribution to their field. If that is okay with you, I'll get started since it's
Awesome.
an even-numbered episode. Great.
Go.
I'm going to start off by telling you about Anna Mae McCabe. You ever heard that name? It's a great sounding name. It sounds like a frontierswoman. woman.
Not.
Anna Mae McCabe was born February 16th, 1920 in Buffalo, New York. She was the middle child, having an older brother and a younger sister. Her parents met as officers in the Salvation Army, which I don't know how much you know about the Salvation Army, but it
was not a standing army as far as I know. But
no, it's more of a religious organization,
right.
but you did hold officerships in there, and you could only have a relationship of a marital kind with another officer within the Army. I don't know too terribly much about it, but it doesn't sound like a barrel of fun. But the family was very close. They bounced around Western New York and Eastern Pennsylvania for a while before settling in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Anna was musically inclined towards the piano and the organ, which she played at church, and she was extremely talented in this regard, and she had considered a career in music. But one listen to the Billy Joel song Allentown affected that very badly, and she settled on a nursing career instead. Why? She cried. Why is this guy so popular? My God, go listen to his Attila stuff. It's god-awful. No, that would be an anachronism, as someone pointed out. She didn't listen to that as far as I know. But she did earn a diploma from the Allentown General Hospital School of Nursing in 1941. By May of 1942, Anna was serving in the Army Nurse Corps. And in January of 1943, she was sent to, guess where she was sent to, Bryan? In January of 1943.
The UK.
She was sent to India.
Oh. Okay.
To her post at the 20th Field Hospital, right at a place we've talked about before on this podcast, right to the entrance of the Lido Road leading to the jungles of Burma. The conditions were awful, In addition to wartime wounds, there are the joys of dysentery, tropical diseases, and all kinds of snakes and other critters whose bites could make you really, really sick. And there were monsoons as well. See episodes 23 through 25 on the China-Burma-India theater of war on this very podcast, where I think we talked about Wary Dunlop, Fletcher Hanks, and who was our other fellow we talked about? Oh, General Joe Stilwell were the characters in that particular trilogy. She served there in India, Bryan, for 2.5 years. She was promoted to first lieutenant. And while she was taking a brief leave, this is the best way, she took a brief leave from India. And while she was on leave, the war ended. So it was like, oh, great, good. She stayed in the Army Nurse Corps, and she served as head nurse at Fort Dix, New Jersey, Valley Forge Hospital, and Fort Myer, Virginia. Over the next few years, those were her assignments. In August of 1950, she was sent to, guess where?
1950?
August of 1950. Guess where she was sent?
Korea?
Korea! Specifically Incheon. What was going on in Incheon at the time, you ask?
Vacationing,
well,
lots of spas, right?
Lots of vacationing, specifically by Joseph MacArthur. General Joseph MacArthur had his landing at Incheon at the time with the UN forces, and this was a early push in the Korean War, and I'm going to call it a war, not a police action. And this Incheon landing led to the recapture of Seoul by Korean forces. So it was an early victory for the South Korean forces in the Korean War. She described the conditions of Korea to be worse than that of India, primarily due to the extremely cold temperatures and lack of supplies. There's a great book that I used as a source for this called The Coldest Winter. It was the final book published by David Halberstrom, who gave us the 50s. Great author. He describes these conditions in horrifying detail in this book, particularly in the fall and winter after the Incheon landing, because by mid-November, temperatures were plunging down to a low of minus 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Most soldiers had been equipped with summer clothing for this for some reason. There was a large push up the valley towards the Yalu River, and a lot of these guys got stuck between basically a rock and a hard place. It was a horrible landing. It was a horrible time. That's a great book. I highly recommend it. It describes how these guys survived at all in the initial days of the Korean War. She spent 7 months at the 4th Field Hospital, and then another 14 months in country, going between different field hospitals. In 1951, she was transferred to Tokyo General Hospital, where she spent 12 months there, and then on to Fort Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, in 1952 as the OB and PEDS director. So that's a nice change of pace. Right. Go from treating these horrible wounds to welcoming new folks into the world. She graduated from the Nursing Service Administrative course at Fort Sam Houston. She was subsequently appointed to head nurse at Walter Reed. She was selected as one of 3 private nurses for Eisenhower during his bout of ileitis that he had. She found time during this period to get married to William A. Hayes in 1956. He was the director of, this is a really cool job. He had a director in 1956 of a job services center for disabled people in Washington, D.C. He helped these folks get and keep jobs. So they were a real power couple. She took his last name and now went by Anime Hayes, which is a pretty cool name unto itself. And in 1958, she earned a bachelor's degree from Columbia in nursing education. In 1960, she returned to South Korea, this time Busan, where she was the chief nurse of the 11th EVAC Hospital. From 1963 to 1966, she was the assistant chief of the Army Nurse Corps. And in 1967, she became chief and was promoted to colonel. In 1966, she earned her master's in nursing from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Ann Hayes also traveled to Vietnam 3 times during that war to visit with and monitor nurses. So you can probably think of her character kind of like when Houlihan had her superiors visit to monitor the nurses. That's kind of the role she had, right? But in Vietnam, not Korea.
Sure.
So you can see that she's a go-getter and she's done a lot in her career, being involved in World War II, Korea, and in Vietnam. Let's take a break from this career and check in with the second subject of today's story. Elizabeth Hoisington. She was born in Newton, Kansas on November 3rd, 1918. To say she was born into a family of soldiers would be a bit of an understatement. Her father was a West Point graduate, an Army colonel. Her grandfather was also a colonel and helped organize the Kansas National Guard, and she was a direct descendant of one of the founders of the state of Vermont, and a man who was a revolutionary soldier in the American Revolution, Ebenezer Hoisington, which might be my favorite name we've ever heard on this podcast. So during World War II, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was created by the Army with the purpose of giving women military opportunities other than nursing. Because up until then, you were a nurse in the Army or anything else. Hoisington had earned a degree from the College of Notre Dame in Maryland in 1940. In the fall of 1942, she enlisted and completing the WAAC basic training at Fort Des Moines, Iowa. Then current regulations required women to serve in units before they could even think about applying to the Officer Candidate School, OCS. That's probably a term we've all heard before. She served briefly as a private in a unit in Maine, and this was an early alerts base because it was on the coast. So, looking out for planes and so forth. I say briefly because the unit commander almost immediately recognized her talent and potential and promoted her to first sergeant. I just said, "Oh yeah, you're meant to do bigger and better things,
do more things than that." Right.
Hoisington then found the most central casting. Picture the dude from Stripes, Warren Oates, the most central casting male first sergeant she could find, and said, "Teach me everything you know about the Army." She claimed later that when she went to the OCS, she never had to crack a book because she learned everything from this guy. She was commissioned by the spring of 1943, and the WAAC morphed into what we know as the WAC, the Women's Army Corps, which up until I did this story, I learned everything about the WAC from my next door neighbor growing up and from the song by Cheap Trick when they talk about mom served in the WAC in the Philippines. She had been a third officer in the WAC, but the ranks were standardized and streamlined, so she now came in as a second lieutenant. And from then on, it was a matter of just building a very solid career in the Army. She was deployed to France just after D-Day. She stayed in post-World War II Europe, where she did serve in France and in Germany, and she even had stints over in Japan. She served on the staff in San Francisco and at the Pentagon, and built a long, solid career of excellent service. In August of 1965, she was appointed director of the WAC and served in that position for several years. She spent the entire year of 1967 visiting WACs who were stationed in Saigon and Long Ben in Vietnam. Wow. Now, so these are two women who were very successful in their career, two different paths. One was a nurse, one was more of organizational and command. To my knowledge, these officers never met during their careers. They served in different places and at different times. They may have crossed paths in Vietnam, but I didn't see any evidence of that. But there is for sure one exception. The two women definitely met on June 11th, 1970, at a ceremony officiated by the Army Chief of Staff, General William Westmoreland, and Secretary of Army Stanley Razor. Anna Hayes and Elizabeth Hoisington were both promoted to the rank of Brigadier General of the United States Army. They were the first women to attain this rank, Hayes receiving it first by virtue of the alphabet. So if she had not taken her husband's name, she would have been the second person to receive it, Hayes Hoisington. After the ceremony, General Hayes requested that the driver take her to the Army Officers Club, where she'd be dropped off at the front entrance, because even though women officers were entitled to the use of the Officers Club, just like their male counterparts, they had to use a side entrance. But who would now have the gall to tell a general to use the side entrance? Anna Mae McCabe Hayes died on January 17th, 2018, at the age of 97. Eligible for burial at Arlington, she declined the honor, preferring to rest beside her parents at a Lehigh County cemetery in Pennsylvania. Elizabeth Hoisington shares with her brother, General Perry Hoisington of the United States Air Force, the distinction of being the first brother and sister generals in the U.S. Armed Forces. She died August 21st, 2007, at the age of 88 and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery.
Wow.
That is the story of the first two women who attained the rank of general in the United States Armed Forces. Anna Mae Hayes and Elizabeth P. Hoisington.
Yeah, very, very cool. Never
Very
heard of
cool.
either one of them, and I'm reminded of the. I mean, yeah, obviously, to this day, the level of sexism and misogyny that's present in society in general, but certainly in the military, that's still ever present. But it's good to hear stories about people who just sort of happily ignored it and just went about their about their lives. Like, yeah, you go be sexist over there. I'm gonna go excel over here.
Hoisington appeared on many talk shows after her promotion
Uh-huh.
and appeared on the TV show What's My Line,
Oh, wow.
promoting this idea of women in the military. And General Hayes went on to continuing to fight for women's rights in the military. And as proof of the kind of person she was, she went on to make a point of, why don't men who are spouses of women serving in the military, why don't they get the same benefits that women who are spouses of men serving in the military do?
Oh, right.
So she pushed that through as well. So tremendous leaders and tremendous people from everything I could read about them.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And I would like to, because I don't think I've done this, but I would like to dedicate this particular story to my late parents. My mother was an RN who served not in the armed services, but in the emergency rooms and psych wards in hospitals across South and Central Texas in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we all know if sergeants are the backbone of the U.S. Army, nurses are the backbones of a hospital. And of course, my father, who was a major with he was a surgeon with the 67th EVAC in Pleiku, Vietnam. And he had a real respect for the military, and in particular for the folks who I think he would have gotten along real well with General Hayes. Sources for this were Wikipedia, a very cool website called koreawar.org, which can trace for you where different field hospitals were. Like if you want to look at it, was there really an 80 double nickel MASH hospital? You can look that up with cool photos from actual MASH hospitals and field hospitals in Korea. And David Halberstrom's The Coldest Winter.
Very
So
cool.
there you go.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, very, very cool story. Wrap up Women's History Month. I mean, we've talked about a lot of women. Last Women's History Month, we did far more. So good that we wrapped it up. With a strong one.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's very cool.
And do we have
not to denigrate the proceedings, but I have a very benign curse word this week, which I'm glad for.
It's time for the Dream Idiot's curse word of the week.
Ever heard of the Shaggy defense?
The Shaggy defense?
Yes.
Would this do with Scooby Doo?
I think it must. It's basically it's because it's the world's dumbest defense. The Shaggy defense. I mean, it's basically what R. Kelly used to defend himself. It's basically it wasn't me. You can't charge me with that. It wasn't me. The person you saw on video looks just like me. That's not me. The person you saw driving my car looks just like me. It wasn't me. So it's the Shaggy, or I guess Scooby defense, and it's very commonly used, but it is the dumbest defense ever. The Shaggy defense. Thank you, Urban Dictionary.
So it's like the people who go through they're caught going through the cameras and get the ticket for the red lights and so forth. It wasn't me, the cameras. Clearly it is.
Who's that in your car? Yes. All right. You ready for mine?
Yes, I am, sir. What do you have for us this week?
Okay. Well, we always say on Dream Idiots that we are not a true crime podcast, except on the occasions when we are. So this is one of those occasions. It was a cold Sunday morning, in fact, in November of 1997. And Amy Harrison was headed to work. It was 9 a.m., and she was going to Frank Tillery Elementary School to work on lesson plans and prepare for the coming week. She did a little changing out of decorations, some grading, some filing, mapped out some of her coursework for the coming week. About 11:30, she walked down to the teacher's lounge, grabbed a drink and a munch, used the restroom. She was about to return to her classroom when she came out of the teacher's lounge, and she was met by a man pointing a gun at her face. He forced her back into the lounge, and of course, there was no one there. It's Sunday. They're alone. Forces her into the bathroom, and there he rapes her. She would say later he was being careful. He didn't touch anything. He wore sunglasses, and he had a wool cap pulled way down. She could see small tufts of reddish hair poking out. He was shortish, stocky build. She didn't get a good look at him because at times he used her pants to cover her face. He was surprised, maybe even irritated when he ejaculated on her leg, irritated by lack of control, irritated by leaving evidence, maybe both. He quickly grabbed Harrison by the wrist and disgustingly, and this is just awful, used her hand to wipe the semen off her leg and onto her clothes. It soaked into her t-shirt and her sweater.
Oh, God.
He forced her out of the bathroom and then back to her classroom where he raped her again. He took her underwear and then he was gone. She was, of course, shocked, stunned, brutalized, overwhelmed. She found a janitor who happened to be on site. 911 is called. Her husband is a cop. Of course, the school is then swarming with police. Even though no one else was in the teacher's lounge or in the other classrooms, there were many other people on campus that day, just not in the areas where she was. The school routinely rented out their cafeteria to a local church to use on Sundays. So people were definitely milling around. Also, the only other staffer on site that day, besides the janitor she found, was one of the cafeteria workers. Unknown if he was there to help with the church group or whether he was also prepping for the week. He definitely had a bit of a reputation for being a little bit sleazy, making inappropriate comments to female teachers. But this is 1997. Cameras are not, they exist, but they're not nowhere near as universal and as inexpensive as they are now. The scene is investigated very thoroughly. Many people are interviewed. None of the 250 churchgoers had any helpful information.
Good God.
There is no video footage of the perpetrator. There are no fingerprints. There are no hair follicles. There's no photographs. There's no one sees anyone running away. No one sees a vehicle speeding out of the parking lot. There is only the rapist's DNA from the semen. The cafeteria worker, who's sort of sleazy, quickly, he's brought in for questioning. He quickly volunteers his DNA, and he's immediately ruled out. The DA's office does secure what's called a John Doe arrest warrant in case anyone tags this DNA ever again. But that's all they have. The case goes cold. Welcome to Rogers, Arkansas. This is part of the Walmart triplex that is Bentonville. So very safe part of the world in 2020. The metro area here has about 54,000 residents. It's grown by over 50% between 2010 and 2020. So it's one of the fastest growing areas, frankly, in the country. I've been in the state of Arkansas, I think exactly twice in my entire life, and both times I decided rather quickly that I didn't really want to be in Arkansas any longer. But it must have some sort of appeal to some people. But we move forward all the way to February 23rd of 2017, nearly 20 years later. James Appleton is sitting in the cab of his truck in a parking lot on Gan Ridge Road, and he's talking on the phone. A passerby comes cruising along, and he sees a white Chevy Malibu sitting directly behind Appleton's truck on this two-lane road. The driver of the Chevy sticks his arm out the window and waves this passerby to cruise on through. Moments later, that driver says he sees the Chevy, the Malibu speeds away. And the passerby realizes, oh, wait, I know who's driving that car. I know that guy. A bit on James Appleton back in the truck. Appleton is born in 1957 in Merriam, Kansas. He is widely viewed as a kind, smart, bright, caring guy. He's plugged into his community in a very active way. Graduated from high school, Southwest High School in 1975. Then spent 27 years working at Emerson Electric as a supervisor, and then served another 12 years as a carpenter. Then in the early 2010s, he got a job working for the Gateway Rural Water Authority. Gateway is a town that's in the area as well. It's a little bit further north and east from the Bentonville Rogers area. It's right up against the border with Missouri. It has a population of like 400 or 500. And the Water Authority just kind of governs, controls, manages water for the tiny town, but also kind of the surrounding area and the rural area that's in that area. So super nice guy, well liked, it's just kind of lauded across all of the entire community, and also crazy handy. He's probably one of those guys. I mean, he's been an electrician, a plumber, and a carpenter. His garage, I'm sure, is very impressive. He also worked he volunteered as a volunteer fireman in the area. He's just one of those guys who was very, very plugged in. So he's sitting there in the cab of his truck, and he's talking on the phone to his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law is Andrew Tillman. Tillman happens to be the mayor of Gateway, the tiny little town. Tillman would later say that Appleton mentions to him on the phone, "Oh wait, there's a white car coming up behind. Oh, they stopped. Oh, they're coming up right next to me. Oh, they're going past. No, they stopped." And then Tillman says that Appleton indicates that the car has stopped, and he hears voices a little bit. Then he hears what sounds like a car door closing, and then silence. Police would arrive on the scene sometime later. They look in the cab of the truck. There is no white Chevy there any longer, and they find Appleton dead. He had been shot once in the face and died instantly. So there's an intense and immediate outpouring of support, people wanting to offer up information. The passerby volunteers. He's pretty dang sure he saw Grant Hardin sitting there moments before, and saw Grant Hardin speeding away because he knows Grant has a white Chevy Malibu. Oh yeah, and by the way, Grant lives on Gan Ridge Road, that road right nearby. So who is Grant Hardin? Well, he's kind of the poster child for people who want to be in law enforcement. Are you dumb as a post and at least slightly racist? Do you hate authority unless you are the authority? Are you not detail oriented in any respect? Perhaps you too can consider a career in law enforcement. That's who Grant Hardin is. In 2017, when all this is happening, he was working as a corrections officer at the Northwest Arkansas Community Corrections Center. It's a women's prison in the area. He had been the police chief for Gateway for 4 months, just immediately prior, for 4 months in 2016. He'd been in and out of law enforcement for most of the previous 20 years, or at least he tried to be. He had been fired from the Fayetteville Police Department. He had quit the Huntsville Department after brutalizing someone and using pepper spray during a traffic stop. He'd been allowed to resign at least once before from a position in Eureka Springs in '96 because he'd been accused of falsifying documents. And there are just complaints like this are rife across his history. He happily broke the rules when it suited him, and according to him, it was never his fault. Someone didn't like him, someone had it out for him, etc. He's just one of those guys who's always aggrieved, basically. So police now know that he lives nearby and he owns a white Chevy. They ask him to come in, and they also talk to his wife and his daughter. They had actually gone out to dinner that night, the night of the shooting, and apparently Grant had made some comment to his wife during the meal about how if something happens to me, you and the daughter will be just fine. And it was less of a question, more of a statement, sort of talking to himself. Police do bring him in and attempt to interview him. and at least initially he's not under arrest, but he is read his rights, and he immediately exercises his right to remain silent. So I mean, I have a pretty dubious view, obviously, of law enforcement in general, because I know them to be um, lazy and dishonest, and will happily steer you into something or try to get you to admit something that isn't true. So I don't necessarily have a big problem with someone wanting to remain silent, whether they're innocent or guilty. I think there are a lot. I mean, I know several. I wouldn't say several. I know a few criminal defense attorneys who say, "Don't talk to police. Don't talk to police. Even if regardless of anything else, don't talk to police." But there is video of him being, I say interrogated. He doesn't really say anything. Video of him being essentially completely mum. And then when pressed on why he's being silent, he gets frustrated and says, "Well, you told me I have the right to remain silent. So why are you getting upset with me by my insistence on using my rights? That doesn't make any sense." They press him more. They ask him about his past in law enforcement. They ask about Appleton. He basically refuses to say anything, at least not anything helpful. They tell him, "We just need to exclude you," or "help us help you," or "I'm sure this was just a big accident," or "wouldn't you like to do the right thing?" And this approach, which we've all seen several times, kind of just pisses me off. I mean, I get how it's always good if you're in law enforcement. It's really helpful if your criminal is helpful to the process and just admits things. But come on, just make an attempt at doing your job. The investigators bring in his wife and daughter as well, and basically give him fairly a few breaks where he's basically given time to stew in the interview room. His wife gives him an alibi and says that he was in the yard fertilizing at the time of the shooting, and there's no way he could possibly have been there and shot Appleton. He's allowed to give his daughter and wife a hug before they leave. But again, he is completely stoic and silent. He is exercising his right. Then police get a warrant to search his house and his car, and they find, quote, compelling evidence. When I first was researching this story several months ago, I'm convinced I saw that this evidence was gun residue in his car, and that the passenger window was shattered. When I came back to do research now, because I knew I wanted to do this story, I couldn't find that source. So I'm not totally certain of that, but there was enough interest, or they found enough in his vehicle, in the white car, coupled with the evidence or the testimony of the neighbor who saw him drive by, and he just completely caves in. He admits that he pulled up first behind Appleton because apparently he was going to get out of the car and walk next to his Appleton's truck. But then instead he pulled up alongside, and Appleton turns to his left to see what the hell's going on, and is immediately shot in the face. It's certainly clear that Appleton and Hardin knew each other at least a little bit, knew each other's names, because they kind of traveled in some of the same circles maybe, but there is no motive that is ever shared. He doesn't say, he gives no context as to why this happened. It just seems completely opportunistic and random. And this man is now dead. Even after he admits doing the shooting, his wife still to the media and to the community professes his innocence. So Hardin is, Grant Hardin pleads guilty, and he's avoiding charges of first-degree murder. And because with the plea, instead of getting 50 years, he's given a 30-year sentence. Oh, but wait, there's more. As a convicted felon, he has to submit to a DNA test. So he does that as well, and is run through the database. And it's a perfect match to the John Doe DNA from the 1997 rape of Amy Harrison. For reasons that escape me, in the early 2000s, Arkansas actually changed their state law and imposed a 6-year statute of limitations on rape. But since that change in the statute occurred after that crime was committed, Hardin's basically still on the hook for it. So he is immediately charged with 2 counts of rape. Initially, he intends to fight it, but pleads guilty there as well in 2019. And Benton County Circuit Judge Robin Green sentenced Hardin to 25 years on each of those counts, which means he received a 50-year sentence. Hardin pleaded guilty to murder in 2017 in the Appleton case and received a 30-year sentence there. So the rape sentence will run concurrently with the murder sentence, which means Hardin has to serve 21 years of the 30-year sentence for the murder, then must serve an additional 14 years before he's eligible for parole. He'll be 84 years old by the time he is first eligible for parole. He never explains anything about why he shot Appleton. He does say repeatedly during the punishment and sentencing phases in both trials that he just wants to know how sorry he is, and I completely agree. Mr. Hardin, you are completely sorry. Amy Harrison, did reveal her identity and spoke at his sentencing. She said, quote, "I am not a victim. I didn't deserve this. This was you, and you deserved to go to prison." And then later to the press, she said, quote, "Even for me, it was very tempting at the beginning to say, no, I don't want anybody to know what happened to me. But I went ahead and took the chance. I believe I didn't deserve that." So there you have it. A tale of a worthless dirtbag from Arkansas. So 2 crimes he was convicted for. But if you have someone who is prone toward committing crimes that are completely opportunistic and random, there's other stuff out there he did. Probably.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah.
happily he is a guest of the state of Arkansas. And he will hopefully die there.
Good Lord. And just the strength of character to be able to come forward and do something like that on her part is just remarkable to me. That's
Yeah, she's actually really I don't know what she does now, whether she's still in education or something else. You can actually Google her. There's video footage of her because she talks to the press and appears with the DA at the end there. And she's just super interesting, really compelling, and the fact that she's able to stand up and do that, where I'm sorry, I mean 99.999% would never have the whatever you call that to be out there in front of folks and fielding those types of questions. Happily, her case got wrapped up because the worst part about it, I'm sure, for any of those types of things is just this not knowing where is this piece of what out there in the world. And eventually he got nabbed. Asswipe.
but you still, I mean, I don't like talking about him because he's a piece of shit.
Right.
But you do want to know why the hell he killed the other guy. I mean, what the hell was that about?
Both, at least in their own way, civically minded guys. I mean, it might be the case that Hardin wanted the respect and sort of not authority, but Appleton is definitely held in a certain level of esteem in the community because he's a really good guy. He's just one of those guys where if the church, if First Presbyterian Church has a dead church van, who do we call to fix this battery? Oh, obviously we call James Appleton. He'll be here in 30 seconds and knows how to fix this. And so jealousy, maybe he stole his girlfriend when they were in 8th grade. I don't know. But it seems like it wasn't completely random. It seems like he definitely pulled up and knew the person he was aiming at when he shot him. It wasn't just like, random person in the car, knew who it was. So there has to be some greater context there. But I mean, I'm sorry, you have to be a sociopath to have that level of just hate that's so central to your core or something that you would engage in this type of behavior. I just just mind-boggling. But he's gone now.
Well, hooray science and hooray courageous folks to step forward and take that on and refuse to be victims like that. That's
Yeah.
tremendous.
Yeah, and state of Arkansas, shouldn't have a 6-year statute of limitations.
No, that's one of those crimes that should
that's
not have a
criminal.
statute of limitations. Yeah, that's criminal.
Oh yeah, free now. Right. 6 years in one day, all good. Right.
That's one of those crimes that should not have a statute of limitation.
No, of
That's
course not. It's like quite. Ugh. Okay, but we digress. Right, there you have it, folks. Another one in the books. Thanks for listening to us. We appreciate it. Please like and share and subscribe our stuff wherever you can. Go to dreamidiots.com, Facebook and Instagram at Dream Idiots. And if you have a story idea or a curse word or anything you'd like to chat with us about, drop us an email at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail.com.
sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Be good to each other.
This is a Rough Tiger production.
Bong bong,
Mhm.
Bryan.
Bong bong?
Bong bong.
Bong bong. Good.